How do you even begin to compare two completely different ways of doing good? Like helping a student in one country versus helping a business owner halfway across the world. It feels impossible, right? Well, a really fascinating new paper argues that it's not. It suggests there might just be a universal currency for measuring good.
So let's make this real. Imagine you're trying to donate some money. You have a tough choice to make, and you want your money to have the biggest impact possible. But you're looking at two totally different programs. So on one side, you have a program that helps hearing-impaired students with new technology. On the other, a microfinance program for women living in poverty. I mean, they're helping different people with different problems in completely different parts of the world. So how on earth are you supposed to choose? How do you compare them? And look, this isn't just some thought experiment. For decades, the experts, the academics, the people running these organizations, they've all basically thrown up their hands. They've called it, and I'm quoting the paper here, an impossible challenge. This is the huge roadblock for charities trying to prove they're making a difference, for governments trying to figure out who to fund, and for investors trying to make smart, impactful decisions. Without some kind of common ruler, we're just guessing. Okay, so how do you solve a problem that everyone says is impossible? Well, the authors of this paper break it down into two main ideas. And the first one is that you need a universal yardstick, a single metric that can actually measure good for anyone, anywhere on the planet. And that yardstick is something they call subjective well-being, or SWB. The idea behind it is actually super simple, but it's also kind of profound. It says what really matters is a person's own judgment of their life. It's not about what experts or politicians think should make somebody happy. It's about just asking them. Now, this might look a little complicated, but the concept is really straightforward. Subjective well-being has two main parts. You've got your daily emotions, the ups and downs we all feel, and then you have your overall evaluation of your life as a whole. Since our emotions can change from minute to minute, the researchers zeroed in on that bigger picture, more stable part, what they call life satisfaction. And that becomes our universal currency, life satisfaction. It all boils down to a single, reliable number, usually on a scale from 0 to 10, that anyone, anywhere can use to rate their life. It's simple, it's consistent, and crucially, it's something you can actually compare. Okay, so we have our currency, check. But how does that help us figure out what a social need actually is? Well, that's the second huge idea in this paper. This chart right here is the real game changer. Take a look at that top line. Think of that as the average life satisfaction for an entire country. It's like the baseline or the threshold. Now look at the bottom line. That represents the average for the specific group an organization is trying to help. The social need, then, is simply the gap between the two. And just like that, you have a really simple, powerful, and data-driven definition. An intervention creates social value if its goal is to help people whose well-being is below that national average. All the guesswork just disappears. So we've got our universal currency, and we've got a clear definition of need. Now we can finally go back and take on that impossible challenge. We can actually calculate and compare the true impact of two totally different programs. And here's where things get really, really clever. It turns out success isn't just about the absolute number of points someone's life satisfaction goes up. The real measure of impact is relative. It's all about what percentage of that social need gap the program was able to close. And it comes down to a really simple three-step process. First, you figure out the threshold. That's the national average. Second, you measure the starting point for the group you're helping. And finally, after the program has done its work, you measure again and see how much of that gap you manage to close as a percentage. Let's look at this in action with an example from the paper. On the surface, you've got a U.S. mental health program that improved well-being by 0.6 points. Then you have a microfinance program in Nicaragua that improved it by a huge 1.8 points. Now, you'd think the Nicaragua one is the clear winner, right? But hold on. Let's factor in the social need. The U.S. group started out with a gap of only 0.7, while the Nicaraguan group had a much, much larger gap of 3.2. And this is the aha moment. The program that had the smaller absolute improvement, the U.S. one, actually had a much greater relative impact. It closed 86% of its gap. The Nicaraguan program, despite those big gains, only closed 56% of its gap. This whole framework lets us look past the surface numbers to find a deeper truth about what's effective. So as you can see, this is way more than just a cool theory. This new way of looking at things, this new lens, could fundamentally change how we approach doing good in the real world.
For the first time, donors and investors can really compare apples and oranges and fund what truly works best. Nonprofits can finally show their impact with a clear, universal number. And governments? They can direct money to the programs that are actually the most effective at closing society's well-being gaps. It changes the entire conversation from just good intentions to measurable results.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty powerful question. For decades, the excuse for not making tougher choices was that comparing social good was just impossible. But what if it's not? If this framework gives us the tool to finally do it, to measure good in a meaningful way, the challenge shifts. It's no longer about what we can know. It's about what we're willing to do with that knowledge.